Okay, in this video, I'm going to grade question 3. This is especially important because the rubric on this question, I can't give individual points. So in order to interpret your score, hopefully it'll be helpful to watch this video since the feedback isn't as specific here. Okay, so question number 3. A researcher designs a study to investigate the effect of feedback on perception of incomplete visual figures. Each participant stares at the center of a screen while the researcher briefly projects incomplete geometric figures one at a time at random positions on the screen. The participant's task is to identify each incomplete figure. One group receives feedback on the accuracy of their responses. A second group does not. The researcher compares the mean number of figures correctly identified by the two groups. Okay, so to summarize, the researcher is trying to figure out if, when identifying these geometric figures, if getting feedback is helpful, if getting feedback actually improves the accuracy that the participants have with identifying the shape. Okay, and we could probably guess that feedback would actually make us more accurate. All right, so she said the independent variable in the study is the feedback given in the experimental group. That's a good specificity. And the dependent variable in the study is the effect on perception of incomplete visual figures. Okay, so in the rubric, the independent variable looks good. According to AP's rubric, the dependent variable, you have to refer to the mean number of figures identified, the accuracy of the participants' responses, or perception of visual figures. So I think her response is getting at B and C, the effect on perception of incomplete visual figures. Yeah, so this looks good. So, okay. The next part of the question asks to identify the role of each of the following psychological terms in terms of the context of this research: foveal vision, feature detectors, and the Gestalt principle of closure. Okay, so quick plug before I go on with this. For these words, you want to answer everything you know first. And then for anything that you don't remember off the top of your head, you can obviously look up. What I recommend using instead of Google is the cheat sheet. This cheat sheet will be introduced to you in the next part of the lesson. But just to quickly show you, it looks like this. So there's a link to this in this lesson today. This is going to be much better than Google to use to look up definitions during the AP because it's just one place where you can find everything and you don't have to sift through billions of websites on Google and worry about plagiarizing. So this is the best one to use. I'm going to do Control F. And for example, if I needed to remind myself what is Gestalt principle of closure, I can easily jump to that part of the document and find a summary there, or if I needed to look up the other word, feature detectors. Sorry, my Wi-Fi is being a bit slow. Cool. So you get the idea. It would take me straight to the definition. Cells that see motion, shapes, lines. Cool. So just quick plug there. Back to the question. This document is going to be really helpful for you during the exam and during the AP. All right. So she said, foveal vision is the main source of vision. If a person's foveal vision is good, the central visual field will allow participants to view figures more accurately. Good. So foveal vision is all about accuracy and clarity of your vision. So using the word like seeing the visual figures clearly or accurately, that's all perfect. Okay, feature detectors. These are all about sensing movement, angles, and shapes. Okay, so she said, allow the brain to detect certain type of stimuli that include movements, shapes, and angles. Good. The feature detectors will allow for the participants to be able to identify parts of the figure. Good. And the Gestalt principle of closure allows for participants to be able to see figures that are incomplete as being complete because they're able to fill in the features. Good. Okay, so again, good place to look for these definitions would be this study guide. And yes, this looks good for part B. All right, part C, back to more research methods type questions. Asks, describe how each of the following terms relates to the conclusions that can be drawn based on the research. Okay, so random assignment, flipping a coin, and assigning participants to either the control group or the experimental group. Two things you could say here. One would be random assignment allows us to conclude a cause and effect relationship. So if we randomly assign participants to groups, and then we see a difference between the two groups, between the experimental and the control, we can then conclude a cause and effect relationship. The other response that would make sense here would be about reducing bias. So if we're randomly assigning participants to groups, we reduce the effects of bias in terms of gender, race, age, other factors that could influence the outcome of the study. If we're randomly assigning participants to the two groups, then we can reduce the bias effects of having, like, for example, like more men than women in one group. We don't want that. We want to make sure we have like a randomly distributed experimental group and control group. Okay, she said random assignment relates to the conclusions that can be drawn based on the research because this allows for there to be cause and effect, ding, 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 conclusions to be made about the independent and dependent variable. Also, it reduced bias within the characteristics of the participants. Okay, so she mentioned both. Just one would have been fine. And this response is good because it shows you both of the impacts of random assignment in an experiment. Okay, last part is about statistical significance, how that relates to the conclusions that can be drawn based on the research. Statistical significance relates to the conclusions that can be drawn based on the research because it is a way of determining the results that are not likely to occur by chance. Yes, so saying that the results are statistically significant means that we can say that, yes, the independent variable does cause the changes in the dependent variable, and that's not just a random thing. It's not just occurring by chance. We can actually say that there's some significant relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. In this case, there's a significant relationship between the feedback that someone's getting and then the accuracy of their responses the next time they try. Okay. Hopefully this was helpful as you look through your own response and try to interpret your own score on the FRQ. Of course, reach out if you have any more questions, especially before you take the final exam on AP Classroom. Let me know if you have any questions about this video.